Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight we'll be continuing with the Analects, book 13. We will have 1 to 2 readings, and then we'll go to Jason's translation. Then we'll open it up to comments. And after that, we ask that you actually keep those comments closely related to the passage that we read. And then towards the end, we'll have time for open discussion and dialogue. So with that, would anybody like to read their version of the Analects?
Yeah, let's start from 19 and just read one chapter for first for 19.
So if there's nobody's going to step up, I'll just read.
I can read if nobody else wants to.
Yeah, and then I can do a second reading after that. But go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
I read after. I gotta get my computer out though.
Perfect. I believe what I have is the Leggy translation, and this is the Analects, verse 19. Fan Chi asked about perfect virtue. The master said, "It is in retirement to be sedately grave, in the management of business to be reverently attentive, in intercourse with others to be strictly sincere. Though a man go among rude, uncultivated tribes, these qualities may not be neglected."
Thank you, Amam.
Mark?
So, Mark, you want to read your version or?
Sorry, I'm not ready yet.
Okay, so let me share my translation. Because of the 19, 20, 21, 19, 20, 21, I will do one by one. So that's so 19. So here is a fan ci, and one thing I'd like to note is a lot of students, Confucius students, ask about ren, what's ren, and then fan ci is a special. He asked 3 times, so this time is the 3rd time. Okay, at least here on the book 6, he asked about ren, and Confucius tell him, make sure you do the difficult part, and then think about the result later. And in book 12, Fan Ci asked Ren the 2nd time. Confucius said, make a very simple answer. Okay, Ren means love people. And this time, Fan Ci asked the 3rd time. Okay. So Fan Ci asked about Ren. The master said, be courteous in office, be courteous in office, be respectful in work, be devotional, or you want to call sincere to people. Don't stop practicing Zen even in barbarian land. So that's Confucius' answer. Every time it's different, but you may find some consistency. So I will stop here, and then that's followed by a brief discussion. Thank you. Amang, please.
I just have one comment to make about this passage. It's interesting because we may have lost track from last week, but the previous passage, verse 18, is Confucius speaking with Duke Shi about upright men and the father who stole a sheep. He is in barbarian lands, quote unquote, in that scene, in that vignette. And so here we have him saying, when in Rome, don't do as the Romans do. Continue to practice what you know to be the upright, moral, correct behaviors. And so this is actually directly derivative from that last passage of what it is to be upright, or what it is to be ren, or virtuous.
So we'll open it up for comments right now. And DLJ seems to have his hand up. Go ahead, DLJ.
Yeah, thanks. So the version I'm looking at, names and shames. it says who the barbarians are, and is it Yi and D or Yi and Dai? I assume it's Yi and D, right? So these, it says they're non-Han. So there's a bit of, is this racism? What's going
I
on?
think that during that time, all the so-called cultured word are very racist, right? So same as when I read this one, I will see like, you know, when Plato talked about barbarian, right? He meant Greek. He meant Persian. Okay, and then they even have a war within all the Greek Hellenic war. They are not barbarian, right? Even they have fighting each other. So I think that's the same kind of concept. Yes, that's.
Right, so I was wondering if they were clan or caste, so whether they were separate or hierarchical.
For the different people.
Yeah, so you explained that.
Yeah, for example, like Amman said, like people on the south, okay, so Chu, okay,
yes,
that's developed, but they are not really qualified as real barbarian, right? They are just a little bit like a foreigner, probably similar to Athenian see the Macedonian, okay, probably this kind of Athenian see the Macedonian, right?
so that's even more insulting because they're saying they're not even good barbarians.
So I don't know how far, but I think in book 14, Confucius has a very clear definition of a barbarian. The barbarians, they dress different. Ancient Chinese tie their hair up and well kept. They have the clothes do it on the right side. So Confucius' worry is if barbarian rule, Chinese will have hair loose and the well clothes on the left hand side. So if you want to make a clear definition, that's a Confucius definition. Okay, so the dress, the hairstyle and the clothes are different, and which is important for next 2,000 years.
Yeah, got it. So I just saw everyone's comment in the chat. I was actually thinking the English and the Scots. When he said that they're dressed differently, I was thinking of the Scots rather than the French. But yeah, French applies. Yeah, I'll go with that.
So, Huang.
So we have fun. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to say that at the time of Confucianism, we were not plagued yet with that disease called to be politically correct. So Confucianism was encouraging us to racism, to Han supremacy, to sexism, and etc. So those were natural man, not hindered by stupid politically correct concepts. So don't be shy. The Greeks were a superior race and they had the same attitude.
Since we're talking about this, I'm going to weigh in just a tiny bit. This isn't as antiquated as it seems because, you know, foreign barbarians isn't that unusual a way of understanding people outside of China. For the Chinese, even now, you could be, you know, here, I need a foreign barbarian. I actually had a professor who would say that anytime they wanted to have somebody come speak to them who was a Westerner. They're like, I need a foreign barbarian. And so, you know, I could be grabbed for just such an occasion. The criteria, and Jason did a good job of pointing it out, the clothing, the hairstyle, what has really constituted whether a people were civilized or whether they were barbarian is how I guess the way of saying it would be Hanified they were. Did they read Chinese? Did they write Chinese? Did they adopt Chinese custom? And were they familiar with Confucius? Those qualities brought somebody closer into civilization versus being a foreign barbarian. And really, up through the modern times, treating those who weren't Hanified as foreign barbarians was not an uncommon behavior amongst the Chinese.
Thank you, Aman.
Many Chinese. I have to qualify that.
Oh, I think only Aman qualified here, so because he wear cap. So
Guan.
Let's not forget that in the past, the tribal identity, especially the tribal identity of glorious group, was very strong. Okay, the English word barbarian comes from barbaros in Greek, and barbaros comes from barbar, meaning that when people speaking languages that are not understandable, that you only hear unclear sound. Okay, so the basic meaning of a barbarian for the Greeks of ancient times is a person who doesn't speak Greek. And let's not forget that at the time of Pericles, of Socrates, of Plato, and so on, all those guys, the powerful empire of the neighborhood was the Persian Empire. And even the Persian Empire was looked down by them as barbarian because the Persians spoke Persian and not Greek. So in the past, people were a lot more relaxed about their tribal identities than nowadays. I stop here.
okay, we probably can move on.
Yeah, sure. So
Okay,
we
so let's go. Yeah,
on to number 20.
20. Yeah.
Would anybody like to read? Or I can go ahead.
I
and
have
read.
the loud translation.
Go right ahead.
Su Kung asked, "What must a man be like before he can be said truly to be a gentleman?" The master said, "A man who has a sense of shame in the way he conducts himself and, when sent abroad, does not disgrace the commission of his lord can be said to be a gentleman." May I ask about the grade below? Someone praised for being a good son in his clan and for being a respectful young man in the village. And the next, a man who insists on keeping his word and seeing his actions through to the end can perhaps qualify to come next, even though he shows a stubborn petty-mindedness. What about men who are in public life in the present day? The master said, "Oh, they are of such limited capacity that they hardly count."
Great. Thank you, Mark. I think here, this one has a lot to talk about because this one is, personally, I like this one because it's a clear definition. I should not call definition for the requirement for different kind of so-called 事. I think when Mark read this one, the Lao's translation translate as 事 as gentleman. Some will translate as scholar, and I decided to translate as a learned man or learned person because at that time not everybody study, but whoever study should be qualified as 士, or you can consider as low ranking, very low ranking aristocrat. Okay, so anyway, 士 same as 君子. Okay, the same concept. Important concept in Analects. And here, Zhi Gong ask about 士, this kind of concept, and some translators gentleman. Okay, but 士 we will consider in Confucius' word would be the person who learned, but only the person reach the perfect virtue can be called 君子. So 士 is easy to be a 士, but it's not that easy to be a 君子. So here, Zhi Gong asks, how can a man be qualified as a learned man, which is 士. The master said, one who conducts himself with a sense of shame, and who, when sent to four corners of the world, does not disgrace his prince mandate, can be called a learned man. So that's the first level Confucius talking about. You at least you have a self sense of shame. That means you are a moral person and you work for your prince, and you can work will never disgrace your prince mandate. So of course, not everybody can do this. So Zigong asked, may I ask what's the next level? The master said, his clan and the household call him Xiao, which is filial piety, and his village and the neighbors call him respectfulness. So, or you want to call the fraternal piety. So basically in the household, that means your big house, okay, not like a 4 people house. We're talking about all of your cousins with the same last name. In the household, people know you are Xiao, which is filial piety. And then in your neighbor, you know you are a respectful person. So in this case, you can be called 士 or learned person. Then Zigong asked, may I ask what's the next level? That's one level down. The master said, his words are trustworthy. His actions are decisive. He is an attentive small man, but qualified as a secondary learned man. So here, I translate the word small man and basics just read word by word in Chinese as 小人, small man, which is opposite to 君子. So small man doesn't mean a bad person. It just, I think the Laos, another translation call it the petty-minded, okay, small-minded person. This kind of person, very careful, cautious, this kind of person, attentive, small man. So he only take care of himself, okay, make sure himself reach his virtuous self. So this kind of person, Confucius said, even he is a small man, but qualified as a secondary learned man. Then Zigong asked, right, that's the key. How about those who participate in governance today? How about the people, our governor, mayor, city council, how about them? So Confucius say, alas, they are like a small vessel. Okay, so small vessel is, they talk about like 孝斗之人. Confucius used the name for the 斗孝之人, means the small bucket, they are just small buckets. Even as Confucius already see people as vessel, is kind of one purpose use people. It's not a good people, but they are very small. So it's not worth it. It's not worth measuring. So Confucius even doesn't want to comment about these people. So I think here if you have a book, I will suggest you mark on this one, because I think this one is compared. Later on, we will read about the definition or description about 士. I think this one is considered as pretty good description about different kind of 士 or learned person. Yeah. Thank you, Amma.
Thank you, Jason. I too really like this passage because the 士 figure in very largely to Chinese history. In much the same way, it's a little anachronistic to think about it this way, but we think about the course of human events, and most of the time we are encountering in history the elite. The people who read or wrote or did things were of an elite class. The 士 of ancient China were that elite class. And at this time, when Confucius is speaking of them, there's no sort of established pecking order for getting there. You just were considered that way or you weren't. And like Jason said, here's a criteria to go by. So what makes someone an intelligentsia or part of the intelligentsia? And he has a really clear, lucid explanation. Conduct themselves with a sense of shame when sent to the four corners of the world. They do not disgrace their prince's mandate. That seems a little off topic to some bookworm learned individual who's sitting around reading scrolls all day. But this is the character that this person should have as a result of that. And so this elite should have a matchingly elite character. And then he says, well, what comes after that? So who else would you consider to be, sure like? And he's saying, the big man on campus, when he talks about somebody who's got the quality of shout, being filial and being fraternally pious with people. You can almost imagine, walk into the village. Who's the big man in this village? This is the person people would point to, because they all have a sense of connection and trust in this individual. And then he's saying, so what's the level after that? And the opposite of the big man on campus is a small man on campus. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that you're not elevated in that kind of way, but you're trustworthy. You're decisive. People can rely on you. That's good enough to sort of start to eke in underneath, the end of the bell curve there. And then he asked about what's happening now in governance. And he's basically saying they don't qualify as any of these. All of them are not hitting any of these marks. They're not even in the curve of qualifying as so-called intelligentsia or so-called learned men. They're just, empty vessels, empty buckets or pails, playing the game of being these people. They wear the clothes, they have the drapings, but they don't have the character for it, really. And that's why I kind of like this, is because this sets it out for the first time, and Chinese history took this and ran with it as almost a guiding rubric to follow to make sure later throughout the rest of Chinese history.
Thank you, Amon. So we have two hands up. First Quan, followed by David.
Okay, that class, the Shu, is very interesting because most of the time they are the cadet sons of the barons, the marquis, the dukes that didn't receive lands or servants. So what did they receive? They received the classical education of the 6 liberal arts. So they were capable to write, to know the poetry, to know the I Ching, to know the historical documents and so on. So their legacy is their culture. So that culture has been transmitted by Confucius to lower social layers. And because of it, I think that the history of China changed, because that lower layers of nobility transmitted that classical education to the commoners. So it puts some ideas in the heads of the commoners that they are capable to uplift themselves, not only socially, but in terms of behavior and in terms of epistemological journey. Of course, it took a lot of time, but it started 25 centuries ago, and I would dare say that it's still keeping on nowadays. And a last note, let's not forget that most of what is happening in that book was happening in the northern part of China, meaning north of the Yellow River. Let's not forget that 1,000 years after Confucius, under the Tang Dynasty, the southern part of China was only 12% of the Chinese population. It means that it operated on at least 2 levels, from the lower layers of the nobility to the commoners, and to the original Han Chinese in the northern part of China, to what the Chinese call the barbarians in the south. Okay, so the signification has been a very long process, and once again, 1,000 years after Confucius, the southern part of China was only 12% of the Chinese population. And under the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese population was around 60 million people. I stop here.
Thank you for that, Quan. David.
Yeah, thank you. So I tend to be looking to somewhat extract, using the historical details, to what's the narrative that's universal in this description of Shu. And the translation that is online for this meetup, they use the word officer, which is really an anemic term, right? So this is looking for something closer to virtue at a social level, a highly developed individual at that social level, spiritual social level. And this gives 3 successful criteria. One is for the politically advanced, one is for someone who's more familially advanced, and someone who's just at a very transactional level has some of these qualities, some of this quality. So the shame is depicted as a universal understanding of human beings. Wherever you go in the world, there's cross-cultural ability to see what your actions mean, so that you don't bring shame on yourself, and on your of course on your emperor. So this means you have an understanding of sophistication in all situations, and foreign situations. You know enough for that. The second level, you only have basically the knowledge of people you've met and the familial understanding of the culture you're embedded in enough to be able to have trust and understanding that your values are, and you can interpret in that milieu. You have that understanding, but not that broad universal understanding. And then the lowest third level is merely within yourself. And this has been said, it's only in the individual. They know what they intend. They're going to be clear about following through on what they meant. No one else may have really understood it that way, but they're stuck. They're really solid on meaning what they meant, and that's a pretty limited. But there's an honor to that, and it's not so shameful. It's just a little cross-eyed, right? But it's laudable in a degree, but it's a very small kind of understanding, like the ant level of the forest, right? So that kind of integrity is still an integrity. That's what I hear. I'd like to hear what people's response to that is. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jason. Please.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Excellent analysis. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, David. I think your description is very clear. Okay, I put it this way. Okay. I'd like to make some distinction on some people may already understand, but there's a lot of confusion here. Is 士 and 君子, what's the difference, right? 士 is easier to, you can self-ascribe 士. Okay, so you got a college degree, you can write well, you are noble born, you are nobility, ranking, certain circle, you can call yourself 士. Okay, no doubt about it. And then you don't call yourself 君子, okay, because it's idol's moral standard on that. So you can say, my father, my grandpa is a 君子, Jiang is a 君子, but you don't say, oh, I'm 君子. I only try to be a 君子. Even Confucius said, he tried to, okay. But 士, you can call yourself 士. So the significance here is Confucius is not actually define what is 是 objective, because I think the standard probably quite objective. But Confucius want to say is this objective condition doesn't make you as qualify a real 是. You need to have some virtue or some achievement to be a real 是. So highest level, you get a job, you never disgrace your prince mandate. Or you can do a certain doing the right behavior to in your family, right behavior in your neighborhood. Okay, perfect example, Yan Hui. Okay, he is perfect student, but he never get a government job. So he's perfect, a good example, good for himself, good to his household, good for the neighborhood, right? And the last level, just a small man, people don't know you, but you just do whatever you need to do. So that's the achievement that you need to achieve. Then you should be considered as 是. Okay, so just like we in the Western philosophy, especially in the Greek, the concept is man and the good man, right? Be the man is easy, you can be a man, but be the good man is a different situation. Same situation, be the 是 you easily, or it has an objective condition to become a 是, but to be the good 是, you need to do something to become. That's I think clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Next up, we have DLJ followed by Mark.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. So as we work through these, I'm always looking for, I mean, I love the historical context that you guys are giving. Appreciate that a lot. But I'm also thinking, and I should say, and I'm also thinking about the applicability to today, because it's the ones that, you know, how relevant are they today is a thought that's always in my mind. And I get the bit about the going to the four corners, to do your prince's will. That's what we call ambassadors now, right? And we do expect them to be of a high quality of, you know, intelligence and diplomacy and so on. So I think that definitely does apply. The bit where he's very dismissive of those government officials of today, that obviously doesn't apply, because obviously nowadays all our government officials are absolutely beyond reproach. So times have changed, haven't they? Yeah.
Very good. Yes, frustration and humanity still exists. Mark.
Thanks, Joe. I wanted to ask about the translation, Jason. I don't remember exactly what word you used as a sense of shame, because both Leggy and Lao have a sense of shame. Right at the beginning, the master said, "He who in his conduct maintains a sense of shame." And I just thought that sounded, I don't know. I was expecting the word humble or modest. And I found that back in book 12, verse 20, where he talks about modesty. So how is that different from whatever is being translated as a sense of shame here? What characters are we really comparing?
If I may interrupt, I would say that
Yeah.
shame is maybe more related to justice, to a sense of justice, and modesty is about the general behavior.
Correct. That's just, yeah.
So let me put this way. I think it's Confucius talk about shame quite often, just like Quan talk about, it's related to justice, but it's on the other side, right? So it's opposite side. So you need to have the sense of shame, kind of self-awareness, reflection, this kind of. About the humble, please let me know, especially I think Kwang or Mark, I'm not sure Confucius talk about humble much. He behaved humble, I know, okay, and Confucius, I don't recall any words described of humble in Chinese during that time. So I think, to me, a lot of English translator probably just impose their feeling to the words, because I don't see when I do the translation, I don't see I use the words humble or humility much. Okay. So that's I think. And please correct me, Kwang. I think you.
Oh, you absolutely right, Jason. You're on one of my favorite topics, okay? Because Confucianism is not proposing to be humble. Confucianism is propose to be li, meaning to act according to rituals, meaning that if you are talking to someone who is your social superior, you have to be dignified in your behavior, meaning that you're not flattering him, but you show that you respect him. Okay, you show that you have deference, but deference doesn't mean that you are flatterer. Okay, you have your own dignity, but you show that you respect him. Same for someone that is your social inferior. You keep your own dignity, and also you would give dignity to the person who is your social inferior. So that is Li is something that can be interpreted as a very high metaphysical level, but on the basic social level, it means that you are capable to keep your dignity and to give the dignity to the other being your social superior or your social inferior. I would say that in Japan, they kept that Li very strong.
Mon.
Yeah,
Or-
I just dropped the etymology for qi into the chat. The character that Mark was asking about, that literally means disgrace or shame, is made up of two parts. It's made up of the character for ear and heart. And it's really, remember that Chinese is a pictographic and metaphoric language. It's also ideographic, I know, but here, this word is comprising two characters to tell you what it means to be humble, not humble, shameful, abase yourself in front of others. Keep your ears open to take in what is said and let it go directly to your heart. We have a moral quality around the idea of shame and shaming as an inherently categorically bad thing from a Western cultural eye. That would not have been true for Confucius, and often isn't true in modern East Asian cultures, because it is simply another instrument. It is another thing to create a more well-rounded human being. There's not necessarily the idea that shaming someone is a terrible thing, as long as you are in the proper position to do it. To bring shame on someone who is your superior, or to, act shamefully, that is to lose face. That's a disgrace. But the idea that you could reproach somebody who is your inferior and make them ashamed for their behaviors is what you have to say to them, going into their ear and speaking directly to their heart to change its orientation. It is a multi sort of layered concept that doesn't paste on particularly verbatim or well with the English word that it also denotes.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief here. I just believe that, just to answer the question here, you along the same lines that Aman had approached it, this idea about shame. You don't want somebody to be shameless. So the idea that shame actually promotes a certain degree of, and I really like what Quan went with the idea of Li, where there's social harmony and morality that's actually involved in that process. So that then that shame actually promotes that. Because if you're doing something that is actually against the best interests of your the people that are under you, or the people you're in charge of, or even things that disgrace your family, that that often means to actually not follow ritual and to not honor the people around you, and that actually leads to a certain amount of lack of harmony when we're talking about Confucius specifically. But I think the concept of Li here is actually the most important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the value of shame. And I do think it's not in terms of shaming somebody, but it's actually an internal state where you're at, where you have it, and it's something that actually changes the way you behave. I always make a distinction also between shame and guilt. Guilt is about an action, and then shame is about the actually internal transformation that actually can take place. So it's an emotion that's actually necessary for social harmony, I think. But it obviously, if it's used externally, then yes, it would actually be negative. But I don't think that that's what they're talking about in this case, and especially if you look at it within the context of Lee. Good, Jason.
Yeah, I think that we deal with shame, guilt, humble, humility, all these kind of words, and then we can have a very long discussion. But since Mark mentioned about book 12 verses 20, it's also talk about 事. Let's take a look on how this one is also related to 事, right? That's another student, Zhi Zhang, who is much younger. Ask about 事. I think he is low humble background, and so he worked his way up. So he asked about 事, right? So he asked, when may a learned man, a 事, be said to be successful? Okay, so similar question, how can we be successful? Then Confucius say, what do you mean by being successful? His name is to be renowned through the state, to be renowned through his household. Okay, so that's Zhi Zhang's definition. The master said that's to be renowned, not to be successful, right? Being successful. So that's Confucius' teaching here. Being straightforward and dutiful, carefully listen to people's word and observing their countenance. Okay, so this part, the first part is talking about how to deal with your superior. And the second part talking about how to deal with your inferior, right? Which is being considerate and humble to people. Okay, I think that's what Mark talked about. Humble to people. In Chinese, it would be 下人. Okay, so humble may not be the very, so these words, 下, should use as a verb. That means when you treat people lower to you or inferior to you, should be considerable. Okay, so in this sense, I translate as humble. I believe Legge also translates as humble in this sense. But if I go to the word, okay, 律以下人, word by word, means be considerable, okay, in order to treat people. I think that's the actual meaning on this one. And all this sentence on the verses 20, there's nothing about 耻, which is shame. That's nothing about this word, but we talk about this. I just want to make it clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. No.
Yeah, thank you. Good. Do you have something really quick there, Quan?
Yeah, I just want to say that it's really the core of the Chinese mythology. Okay, you have to be respectful to your superior, and you have to be courteous to the people who are subordinate to you. Okay, and that is really the core of Confucianism. You have to give to each his dignity.
Thank you very much, David. And then we're going to move on because we do want to get through book 13 this evening, and we're currently only into our third verse.
Right, right. Well, okay. So I think the dignity was a good point that was just brought up. I won't talk about that. But on the shame, as you were saying, Joe, I think shaming is entirely different from what is being described here. Is the requirement is the person is to know shame so that they don't bring shame. So they have the self-awareness, because shame is an awareness state of your social. You are in a state of shame when you feel publicly humiliated, when it's pointed out your shortcoming in a social setting, that you in front of others have this deficit, this deficiency. And if you're treating people in their proper rank and order, the way Quan was saying, you won't bring yourself to this reprehensible state of shortcoming. And so you won't bring shame on you. So you know what is decent. And that's what it is to live knowing what shame is. And that was the requirement, the first requirement, right? That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, David. That's a nice way to close this out. So for the next sections, how many would you like to cover, Jason?
Yeah, just one. It's very short. So
Okay.
yeah, I think I'm finished. So
okay, all right. So would anybody like to read their version? Or
Sure, I'll read 21.
go right ahead, Mark.
The master said, having failed to find moderate men for associates, one would, if there were no alternative, have to turn to the undisciplined and the over-scrupulous. The former are enterprising, while the latter will draw the line at certain kinds of action.
Thank you,
Wow,
Mark.
that's a lot different.
Okay.
That's a lot different, yeah. And like even
Joe, you want to read your version?
yeah, it's significantly different. I'll just read it really quickly. The master said, since I cannot get men pursuing the due medium, to whom I might communicate my instructions, I must find the ardent and the cautiously decided. The ardent will advance and lay hold of truth. The cautiously decided will keep themselves from what is wrong.
Okay, so yeah, okay, so this one is very short, but I think the essence should be simple. Basics, Confucius is talking about the doctrine of the mean. Okay, so everything in the middle. Okay, not over, not enough. Okay, but question here is, I don't know what Confucius told. Okay, he's complaining or he's happy or he compromised, right? So the master said, if I cannot be with those who follow the middle way, which is the doctrine of the means, they must be either ardent or cautious. Okay, those who are ardent always move forward. Those who are cautious never do wrong. Okay, 有所不为. So by the Chinese words, I believe both ardent and cautious. Confucius may think they are okay, still good, okay, still teachable. Okay, that's my understanding. And based on the original use the words, okay, 不得中行而与之. So I translate as with these people. And Zhu Xi's interpretation is impart, which is teaching, right? If I don't get the people in the middle way to teach, I can teach the people who are ardent, which is more on the other side and or more cautious, because the ardent people always move forward, and for the cautious people never make mistake. So both way are fine. So that's my interpretation. But I just based on the text here. So Among, you have something.
Yeah, thank you. I think this gives us a sneak peek into the real Confucius, in a very pragmatic sense of there is an ideal mean, and people are often, if not rarely ever, that ideal mean. So what am I left to contend with? I'm left to contend with ardent people. I'm left to contend with cautious people. Well, if they're too much of this, then I have a different way of instructing them and dealing with them. If they're too much of that, I can do it a different way. And we've seen that play out in his instruction throughout the Analects, that he gears his lessons towards the character of the person he is addressing. Here we get one sort of explicit view of, well, they're not ideal, but they have their strong suits, and you can play to that. And if you can play to that, you can also instruct to that in a manner that will balance them, get them more harmonious. And so I think I find this to be a fascinating glimpse inside sort of his pedagogy of how do I go about instructing and utilizing people in the best way for them and for, everyone in general.
Very good, Aman. Next up, we'll go to DLJ, and I should qualify this. DLJ was just referred to as the perfect balance between pride and humility in the mean in our previous meetup. So I do think that maybe we have somebody that's defying the trend here.
Yes, but bear in mind the person who said it was of no consequence.
Yeah, it was DLJ.
Yeah, the person who said it though, right? Yeah, sorry, I know you want to speed things up, so this is very brief. So the words I've got here is if you cannot manage to find a person of perfectly balanced, that's the word you just used, conduct, to associate with, I suppose, I love that. I suppose you must settle for the wild or the fastidious. I'm reminded of Journey to the West, Tripitaka, the balanced one, and you look at who they had to associate with, the wild monkey, right, and the fastidious, Sandy, I think was. Yeah, so yeah, anyway, just sprung into my head. I thought, oh yeah, they obviously couldn't find somebody who was balanced. Ended up with those. Cheers.
I think you are right. Sandy is balanced because he always bearing a stick, which is balanced on the both sides, right? So,
I was thinking of Sandy as the fastidious.
It is always carry the how do we call it, right? The baggage, right? So they have a bamboo stick, and they have luggage on both sides. So that's why he always keep balance between the monkey and the pixie, right? So monkey is the super ego, and the pixie is it. So Sandy keep balance on that.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this actually comes back to something that we've talked about here, actually specifically last week a little bit with role ethics, specifically in the sense that it's about achieving balance between the individuals, society, and harmony. That's creating a harmony between the individuals. That's where I see it as almost it's how do I best express it? Even between not only society, even between this idea of between the individual and the cosmos. But this is essentially by following ethical principles. And so I think that yeah, this is about achieving balance in order to maintain social order. Anybody else have anything to say?
So we can
Good, let's move on to 22.
yeah, let's do
Yeah, so
the two. Okay, yeah.
anybody want to read? I can do it. 22. The master said, the people of the South have a saying, a man without constancy cannot be either a wizard or a doctor, good and constant in his virtue. He will be visited with disgrace, the master said. This arises simply from not tending to the prognostication. Simple enough.
I can read the Lao.
Go right ahead.
The master said, the Southerners have a saying, a man devoid of constancy will not make a shaman or a doctor. How well said. Quote, if one does not show constancy in one's virtue, one will perhaps suffer shame. The master went on to comment, the import of the saying is simply that in such a case, there is no point in consulting the oracle.
So, excuse me, Mark, what's the last comment from master? The master said?
The oracle?
The master went on to comment, the import, or like the importance of the saying is simply that in such a case, there is no point in consulting the oracle.
Okay, thank you. The reason I'm asking is this one is, I think it's confused. Okay, so
yeah,
of course, yeah. Okay. So I just do my best. The master said, the Southerner have a saying, a person without the perseverance cannot be a wizard. Most of translation translate as shaman and the doctor. I think that this is not two things. I think it's one thing. Okay, that means shamanistic doctor, which is wizard. I remember in Plato, they talk about, I think it's in Laws, Plato talk about the two kinds of doctor, the free doctor and the slave doctor. Okay, I think here it's kind of like a slave doctor. Okay, basics is kind of like low ranking position, which is just cure the people, not a real doctor. It's a wizard. Okay, I think that's what they meant. Okay, a person without perseverance cannot be a wizard. It is good. Okay, Confucius said this word is good. Then Confucius quote what in the Book of Change. Okay, I list here if you can see. That's the Book of Change. Okay, which is Heng. Okay, which also means perseverance. Okay, and on the top is the thunder. On the bottom is the wind. So Confucius call on the third one, which is this line marked here. Okay, that means that's Confucius quote. Without virtue of perseverance, one will bear disgrace, or you want to say bear shame. Bear the words we use is shame. Okay, so that's Confucius quote this one. Why Confucius quote this one after talking about the shaman doctor or talk about the wizard? I think Confucius quote this one because he's talking about even without the perseverance, without the perseverance, you even cannot do this kind of the low-ranking job. That's what my understand, my interpretation. Okay, and then the master said, okay, simply not divine. Okay, because only this one 不赞而已, not divine. So that's why I asked Mark to reread what's the last thing. I think that's the same as what I'm thinking, because it's not to consult the oracle. Okay. So another way to look at this one is he probably talked about the book of change. It's not about divine, not about oracle. It's about moral teaching, because famously Confucius put a lot of moral comment on the book of change. That's one way to understand this chapter. But again, I check a lot of secondary sources. I don't see people really some people said that's a mistake, the last line doesn't count, and all different kind of things. But that's the best I can do to this moment. Yeah, Aman, please.
Thanks, Jason. I have to say I liked your choice to translate "we" as wizard, because I think it is less sort of pejorative than the classic way of translating it as witch doctor. But that's kind of what the idea is: a shaman, healer, someone in touch with divine spirits. As far as the moral of the story goes, this is a really strangely cryptic little passage. You have him talking about Southerners' sayings, you have him quoting the Book of Changes, but then he ends by saying that the common thread between these, perseverance. Without perseverance, these things don't happen. You don't need divination for this. You don't need prognostication. There's no casting of the bones that will give you a result different if you yourself don't have the character of perseverance in the first place. And so that's the moral of the story, is whether it's in barbarian lands dealing with their witch doctors, or it's consulting, the oldest of tomes in the library, divination and divine intervention will not supersede and not help you if you don't first have the character of perseverance to tackle anything that you do.
Thank you, Aman. If anybody else has a comment, I think that this is interesting as well. The differences in the translations themselves. Specifically, I just to repeat the idea of constancy and the importance of actually being consistent. But and he follows it up, at least in this translation, with inconsistent in his virtue, he will be visited with disgrace. So that the idea that it's not, you can't be just virtuous sometimes is an important thing. The one thing that had stuck out, I think, in both my translation as well as Mark's, is the word that's used here. The master said this arises simply not from attending to the prognostication, and gives the idea of prognostication is somehow related to this idea of linking and understanding the consequences. And I think that that's an important point, because Mark's translation said something about the oracle, and like you don't need to seek the oracle, because the oracle would be under somebody that would see the consequences, like have an idea of the future. So I think that this is an idea of wisdom, if you're looking at a basic way of translating it into virtues. But anyway, Quan, feel free to correct me if I said anything that was inappropriate.
No, on the contrary, because I was going on the same direction, because that paragraph is very important, because the I Ching is the first Confucian classic and is at a very deep layer of the Chinese thinking. And there has always been two layers or two directions in the Chinese thinking, meaning that the people thinking that you can reach to the spirits, okay, the shamanistic attitude. And you have a lot of numerology linked with the shamanistic attitude, for example, of the Han Dynasty intellectual Jing Fang. and you also have a more rational attitude, seeing the I Ching, because the sentence, if one is not constant in virtue, one may receive disgrace, is a quotation from the I Ching. Okay, and it stresses more the fact that the I Ching is a book explaining the epistemological development precisely, a development of wisdom, as you said, or of the four cardinal virtue: wisdom, justice, humanity, and valor, and to understand how action have consequences within certain specific contexts, and that we need to striving to have a precise analysis of the situation before doing something, rather than divining in the sense of proceeding to a series of operations, hoping to get an answer from the spirits, or the spirits are in us, that so we have to use our mind in order to decide. So I would say that it's probably one of the most important paragraph with the of the Analects that I would pair with the paragraph 2.4, which is the paragraph using symbolic ages for the epistemological development. I stop here.
Okay, I think that's very interesting. You say this one is one of the important, and 朱熹's comment is 语义未详. Okay, that means meaning is not clear. So, just joke. Okay, thank you.
I'm very honored to be in contradiction with Chu Si.
So okay, anyway, I think we can move
So
on.
let's go 23. Mark, would you like to read your version?
No, let's go 23, 24, 25, 26. Let's do both.
Okay. Let's go for it.
Sure. 23. The master said, "The gentleman agrees with others without being an echo. The small man echoes without being in agreement." 24. Tzu Kung asked, "All in the village like him? What do you think of that?" The master said, "That is not enough. All in the village dislike him. What do you think of that?" The master said, "That is not enough either. Those in his village who are good like him, and those who are bad dislike him." That would be better. 25. The master said, "The gentleman is easy to serve, but difficult to please. He will not be pleased unless you try to please him by following the way. But when it comes to employing the services of others, he does so within the limits of their capacity. The small man is difficult to serve, but easy to please. He will be pleased even though you try to please him by not following the way. But when it comes to employing the services of others, he demands all-around perfection. The master said," this is 26, "the master said, the gentleman is at ease without being arrogant. The small man is arrogant without being at ease." And did you say to go?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. So is it?
You want me to read, or
want to read your own translation?
yeah, that's fine. I'll go ahead and read it. What is it? 23?
23 to 26.
Okay. The master said, "The superior man is affable, but not delatory. Sorry, basically praising him. The man said is adulatory, but not affable." Zigong asked, saying, "What do you say of a man who is loved by all the people of his neighborhood?" The master replied, "We may not for that accord of approval of him? And what do you say of him who is hated by all the people of his neighborhood? The master said, we may not for that conclude that he is bad. It is better than either of these cases that the good in the neighborhood love him and the bad hate him. 25, the master said, the superior man is easy to serve and difficult to please. If you try to please him in any way which is not accordant with right, he will not be pleased. But in his employment of men, he uses them according to their capacity. The mean man is difficult to serve and easy to please. If you try to please him, though it be in a way which is not accordant with right, he may be pleased. But in his employment of man, he wishes them to be equal to everything. 26, the master said, the superior man has a dignified ease without pride. The mean man has pride without a dignified ease.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
The reason I put these four together because they share the same logic and they deal with the 君子 and the small man. Okay, so you probably will find out Confucius' logic, the way of argument is like 君子 is A but not B, and the small man is B not A, right? So that's the way he keep talking. Not all, and just these four, three out of these four are in this pattern. And if you pay attention through the entire Analects, there are many times Confucius will say, 君子 is A but not B, but a small man is B but not A, something like this. So that goes through. Okay, the master said, 君子 seek harmony, not agreement. Small men seek agreement, not harmony. Okay, 和, okay, usually I translate as harmony. So basically it's talking about, I think one translation talking about the agreement and the echo. So similar situation, but I prefer to this way, harmony and agreement. So 24, 子贡 asked, what do you think if someone is liked by all of his village? The master said, I don't approve of him. Okay. So that's important for Confucius. A gentleman, a good, you will not praise everybody. If everybody say, oh, I like him, he's a good man. So Confucius called it 相怨, that means the hypocrite. Okay, so that's Confucius' point of view. Okay, so 子贡 keep asking, what do you think if someone is hated by all of his village? The master said, I don't approve of him. It's better that the good people like him and the bad people hate him. So I think the message is clear, right? Confucius doesn't like the people who praise everybody, but it's obvious if nobody likes this person, that also means has some problem. 25. The master said, a 君子 is easy to serve, but hard to please. And again, he will say, a small man is easy to please, but hard to serve, right? So he said, 君子 is easy to serve, but hard to please. He's not pleased even if you please him. If you please him without following the Tao. But when he employs people, he only expects them to act as vessels. So that means working in accordance with their abilities. Okay. A small man is easy to please, but hard to serve. He's still pleased even if you please him without following the Tao. But when he employs people, he expects them to do everything. The word used is 备, that means comprehensive. Okay. he expect people to do everything. 26. The master said, 君子 are confident but not arrogant. Small men are arrogant but not confident. And I like the translation Joe read the word type, right? And the jiao, okay. Jiao means the if you look at the word, it says a horse on that. That means you ride on the very tall, big horse. So that means you are arrogant, right? And the Tai actually is a mountain, is a high mountain in Confucius' hometown. So the difference of riding on the tall horse and the big mountain is, I think I like Joe's the translation Joe read, the dignified ease, right? It's not self-made. It's naturally this way and never move. Unlike when you can imagine a small man ride on the big horse, okay, the attitude is so-called arrogant. And I translate as confident, but I think the dignified is probably a good translation. But the original words means the mountain and the big horse. Yeah, thank you, Amma.
I'll be brief. Don't be a people pleaser. People who go out of their way just to make everyone happy are never actually confident that they've done the job of making everyone happy, and therefore will often cover that lack of confidence with arrogance. That's the summation of these 4 passages in one quick swoop. The opposite being, if you don't pursue that and you pursue harmony instead and try to be a junzi, then you'll have a confidence that will exude from you that people won't take to be mere arrogance.
We'll open it up for comments really quick. And the word that I was struggling to pronounce was adulatory. Sorry about that a little bit earlier. Would anybody like what to comment on any one of these passages? I mean, I think this is true that if we think about it in contemporary terms, the idea of popularity is not necessarily indicative of virtue. So I think that within that framework, if you're thinking about it in terms of, like what Aman said, the idea of a junzi, you have to have a set of principles and stick towards those principles, and that may lead to some very unpopular decisions at certain points. So that is basically what he's saying is don't compromise on your morals. That's one way of looking at this. There's a few other things that I can mention, but I'll let Mark go first.
I was just going to pick up on that a little, Joe, and ask whether, since the best situation is that those who are bad will hate him. I think you used the word hate, Jason.
Yes, use the word hate. Ooh, okay. Usually I translate hate.
Ooh sounds like a really bad sound to me.
Yeah, that's right.
And it maybe means that we can never really unify everyone because there's this disharmony between the good and the bad, and they're never going to like the same person. So if you are a jinzu and there are some who hate you, are you in danger? Are you like the philosopher who goes back into the cave and risks being killed, or was actually killed in the allegory of the cave?
Well, I think that's a big question, right? But we can refer to the previous chapter, right? 23, right? Pursuing harmony but not agreement. So the good people and the bad people never agree, right? but Junzi still pursue harmony. But how, I don't know. But basics agreement, everybody agree is not Confucius is looking for. Tong, right? The word tong, okay, means same. Okay. So my interpretation, Confucius doesn't expect everybody same, okay, sameness, but he thinking about harmony, okay, harmonious society. That's his thinking. So just like orchestra, right? Some do drumming, some do violin, some do trombone, some do oboe. They are different. They never agree, but they reach a harmony. That's what the best I can do here. Thank you.
Yeah. Good one. A lot.
Yes, one of the translation that I like very much for 1323 is that the gentleman is in harmony with others, but he does not seek conformity. So in the sense that conformity is something that is very different from harmony, in the sense that you cannot force everyone to think the same. But harmony, precisely, if I go back to the image of the Tai Chi Tu, the yin and the yang, when you have harmony, it means that you have opposition, but that opposition would be in complementarity with the main project and not necessarily something to be forbidden. And I think that the wise rulers precisely would allow the opposing voices to be expressed rather than suppress them.
Yeah.
So
I think I will change it to conformity. I think that's a great word compared to harmony.
yeah, the only thing I was going to also pick up on is the dignified ease without pride. That what that actually means. I think that means a couple different things. We were actually just talking about this in a previous meetup. One, you're actually balanced within. You're kind of so that because you're not prideful, so you're actually, and you have a clear depiction of reality as well. So there's that balance that has to exist if you have this dignified ease, and that you can't be necessarily prideful. Contrast that with someone that is prideful without dignified ease. What would then that look like? If you think about it in terms of the individual, probably would look, may come out as angry, arrogant, whatever it may be. It has different ways of manifesting itself. But one is, if you think about it, the individual that is pursuing virtue has a certain tranquility and balance. If you think in terms of temperance, if they're practicing the cardinal virtues, and the individual that is prideful, obviously, is out of balance, and therefore their behavior is going to manifest itself in different ways. I also liked what was talked about with the idea of conformity. Anyway, and then ultimately it's an individual that's staying true to their principles is someone that can't have pride. Because if you're going to be consistent, and this we talked about a little bit earlier, that you are not necessarily letting your emotion, your pride get in the way of your decision itself. So therefore your principles come first and your virtue comes first, and the pride is actually something that is distant. And there's a confidence that comes along with that. A prideful person would actually pride and save face in certain circumstances, and would likely compromise their principles. So I think it's saying a lot. And if we come back to the idea of how to really truly achieve balance and harmony. It's balance and harmony within as it is as much on the social side. And if you're in a leadership position, that would actually be, he's calling him the superior man. That would be important. So anyway, for anybody else.
So we can move to 27 and 28.
Sure. The master said, the firm, the enduring, the simple, and the modest are near to virtue. Zilu asked, saying, what qualities must a man possess to entitle him to be called a scholar? The master said he must be thus earnest, urgent, and bland. Among his friends, earnest and urgent. Among his brethren, bland.
Any other version? Anyone want to read?
27. The master said,
And 28. Oh, I'm sorry.
unbending strength, resoluteness, simplicity, and reticence are close to benevolence. 28. Sulu asked, what must a man be like before he deserves to be called a gentleman? The master said, one who is, on the one hand, earnest and keen, and on the other, genial, deserves to be called a gentleman. Earnest and keen amongst friends, and genial amongst brothers.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Actually, that's an interesting reading.
Okay, so I think this two is relatively easy. So one deal with the one 27. This one is a famous saying, 刚毅木讷 for virtues, which is not Ren, but is very close to Ren. So Master said, firmness, strength, simplicity, and caution in speaking are close to Ren. That's Confucius' definition. So talk about your personality, the way speaking. Okay. 28. Zilu asks, how can one deserve to be called a learned man, which is shi? I think that's the second time. Today we define what's the meaning of shi, right? So Confucius' definition is, I would not say definition, let's talk about how to become a shi. So I believe this one is Confucius' specific talk about Zilu, okay, personality. So the master said, to be sincere, gentle, and amiable is to be a learned man, okay? To be sincere and gentle with friends and amiable with brothers. So it sounds like, okay, in the previous section, Confucius talked about the 3 levels, and then in book 12, okay, and then Confucius defined what does it mean? What does it mean to be a successful shi, or what the how to define a successful learned man? So that's 27 and 28. Then Amang, please.
Yeah, the sort of bouncing back and forth between being a junsa and a shu in these discussions, I think is intentional. I think it's to, in some way, intentionally blur the line, to say to simply have your degree isn't enough. You actually have to have the character that should come with it. 27 and 28 seem like very tailored lessons for a particular student who, I don't know that 27 was speaking to Zulu, but 28 is very definitely speaking Zulu. But it seems like they're the same lesson, just one is as terse as can be, the other one is a little bit more teased out for Zulu's benefit. But throughout this entire discourse so far, we've been talking about these qualities, these characteristics to make this kind of person. And you get that the road isn't identical for every student. It's slightly to the left, slightly to the right, slightly faster pace, slower pace, gentler, more daring, depending on who he's speaking with and what their needs are.
Thank you, Mon. Any comments about 27 or 28? Anybody interested in the sense of the eye, looking at it through the eye? I maybe ask, is this one that we could possibly again revisit the idea of Li, in the sense of, if you think about it, and it's not specific ritual per se, but you do have a set of roles that how you're supposed to interact within those roles. And so it's in order for to maintain a certain degree of harmony, he must ask how he amongst his friends, how he must actually behave in order to maintain a certain type of relationship. And the only reason that came to mind, it would have never have come to mind if Mark's translation didn't use the word benevolence. And that's what kind of triggered it for me. And that's the only reason it came to mind. So I don't know if that's the proper way of looking through it or not. Maybe I'm way off there. Go ahead. Please correct me.
Excuse me. I was just going to say benevolence is a common way that Ren can be translated. And so in one version, we have the Ren translated to virtue. In another version, we have it translated benevolence. I like the translation of Ren, staying Ren, because it's a complex concept that deserves its own stand-in. The other thing I wanted to say, though, was in the Lao translation, I believe it was, or no, it's the Leggy translation that refers to amongst brethren bland. I found that interesting, and it reminded me of learning scholarship and learning to write in a scholarly fashion. You have to tamp down your passionate rhetoric in order to deliver something as flatly as possible. Let the content make the argument is what was always told to me. And I think you're getting sort of an opening salvo of that sort of academic decorum here in Confucius when he talks about being amiable or bland or flat amongst your peers, your brethren, your colleagues, as it were. So I just had to point that out because it spoke to me.
Thank you, Aman. Quan, followed by Jason.
I think that those two paragraphs are very interesting because let's not forget that the context of Confucianism. I would like to remind once again the translation for Te, which is most of the time translated as virtue or virtues. But I think I said 2 weeks ago that Te truly means charismatic virtue. Okay, because once again, at the center of the Confucianist mythology, the gentleman, by his charismatic virtue, will attract the xian, the worthy and capable persons that would serve him in order to uphold the state. And in Confucianist doctrine, which is a doctrine very much believing in top-down hierarchy and in top-down management, the guy at the top has to radiate almost in a metaphysical manner that charismatic virtue. And that's why, let's not forget that the Analects was a book used within the Confucianist school to prepare future leaders. So you have to imagine at the academy with the scholar discussing with the young promising aristocrats who will be future leaders. And that is so important that that future leader would be capable precisely to have perfect humanity, okay, a run. And I always thought that benevolence was a very weak translation, because perfect humanity is precisely that capacity to be within a group and perceiving almost in a magical manner the needs of everyone and using those needs and those capacity for the common endeavor. And that's what I call the Confucianist mythology. And I stop here.
What would you use other than benevolence?
Excuse me?
What other word would you use?
I think that true humanity is my favorite translation, because benevolence in English has a weaker impact according to what I understand. Okay, true humanity for me seems more powerful. Okay, as if, because let's not forget, okay, those are the quality of leaders, and let's not forget that it was in the context of the Zhou dynasty and of the imperial dynasties, okay, and it was a top-down vision of reality and of management. So if you translate, for example, by virtue, it's not bad, but probably that you would admit, I don't know, that charismatic virtue transmits something that is more powerful. So in the same sense, I think that true humanity for Ran transmits something which is more powerful than benevolence.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think
agree
that's
with
a
you.
big subject, you know, and then
That's a really good, actually.
yeah. And I still insist that we should translate the Ren as Ren. The reason is, if you look at the 27, Confucius talk about these 4 things: firmness, strength, simplicity, and the caution in speaking close to Ren. And when he answered to Fan Zi, he talked about Ren is not people. And at the beginning of today, Fan Zi also asked again. Confucius give a long answer. And when you be courteous in office, blah, 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 all these things. So, put this way, even Confucius is not sure how to define Ren. So let's put the word as Ren. That's my opinion. And as a virtue, I usually the De, I don't translate as De. The reason is I find out it's quite similar to the English word virtue, but actually more close to the Greek word arete, right, which means the strength, the excellency, the willing to do this way. So that's the way I decide, and then of course it's totally arguable, but you know, I'll stop here. Thank you. We have 2 more chapters to finish.
We do. So Kevin, okay, do you have a brief comment, and then because we have 2 more chapters, and then we'll be done with the
Yeah, thank you.
13, so.
It's brief. I would consider those big words keep original. For example, I'm just use one them. Is you keep them. The is the. If for example, if you use true virtue, what's a true? All word is problematic. Try use the original words, describe it, especially in Chinese characters, pictograph. If from those original words you see, you break down, it's very interesting to see. Thank you.
So let's do 27 and 28, or 29 and 30, I'm sorry.
I can read the
Anybody,
leggy version if you like.
Cool, nice.
No problem. So we're at 29 and 30.
29 and 30.
The master said, "Let a good man teach the people 7 years, and they may then likewise be employed in war." 30. The master said, "To lead an uninstructed people to war is to throw them away.
Any other translation?
And Mark, do you want to read yours?
Sure. 29. The master said, after a good man has trained the common people for 7 years, they should be take up arms. And 30, the master said, to send the common people to war untrained is to throw them away.
Thank you. These two doesn't sound what Confucius would say, right? Sounds like Sun Tzu in the Art of War. So,
Right.
It's interesting. And okay, the master said, after good politician, I like to translate the good man as a good politician. I believe in Confucius talking about the good statesman, which is not a Confucian politician or Confucian statesman, but it's a good way. Okay, so they work, but not in his moral way. I think it's in book 14 when Confucius talk about Guanzhong, okay, probably fit to this kind of character. Okay, so after good politician teach people for 7 years, they will be ready to fight in a war. Number 30, the master said, sending untaught people to fight is to discard them. I don't think I need to explain this, but it really doesn't sound what Confucius would say, more like Sun Tzu would say. So anyway, thank you, Amang.
Yeah, this almost feels like a bridge between the Analects and the Art of War. Because it comes so out of left field, it feels like a very left turn from everything else we've talked about, but almost sort of as a punchline to this, that everything leading up to this, being a good official, being a good shi, being a junsa, developing Ren, being in office is for the purpose that if you call upon your people to do something, they now have faith in you, they trust you, they understand why you're asking them to do it. And if you simply are going to hold that I'm the boss, I said so, now get out there on the field and pick up that halberd, you're basically throwing cannon fodder to an army that probably didn't have cannons yet. But the metaphor stands.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say cannon fodder, and they didn't. Did they have cannons? Beat me to it completely. But yeah, I saw Jason's footnote that that seemed the league. This might be a link to the legalist. But yeah, it suddenly went procedural, right, or policy, like 7 years for training, and then if not, don't send it to war because they'll end up dead. It's like, where did that come from? So yeah, just what I was thinking.
And then Confucius hardly use this kind of thing, like precise number.
Anybody else have any comments? I mean, it's interesting. A virtuous man or the good man is the one training people for war. I guess we should be encouraged by that. I mean, I guess I don't.
Or maybe
I
it's
don't know.
only a good man or a virtuous man has any right to induce
That
the
I
people
like.
to war.
That I like. And I do remember using, in the Art of War, when they say basically you've decided to go down this way, there is no retreat, and you're going in between two like kind of mountain passes, and like this is it, you're kind of cannon fodder. I remember having that discussion. I was so maybe we did borrow from that, or we couldn't have, but anyway.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Aren't we? Yeah, there's a difference between competence versus comprehension, though, right? So if we're talking about the good man in terms of the one who is wise and understanding, is not the same as the good man who can train you well, because they're competent. This one has that ring of the latter, competence rather than comprehensivity or wisdom. But I mean, I can get how you can read that into it. But I wonder whether this is just implanted like an abrogation, like
So-
a insertion into the Bible.
So
You get those things to sort of justify things in hindsight.
Actually, I'll let Amon ask, but
I am
question.
going to tease something since I have an open platform. I'm working on an article, and no, I'm not working on it instead of the other work I should be doing. I'm just working on it sometimes. But I'm working on an article after doing the Tao Te Ching, the Art of War, and the Analects. A realization dawned on me that if you've read enough Sherlock Holmes, if you've watched enough procedural dramas, means, motive, and opportunity. Those are the trifecta that are just sort of universal in those. But in these three texts, those three human forces, means, motive, and opportunity, are always intimated, and something is forever being placed at the pinnacle, more important than the other two. For Sun Tzu, it is means. For the Tao Te Ching, it is opportunity. And for the Analects, it is motive. What matters more than anything is what motivates you. That is qualitatively different than the other two texts, but it has an overlap. It creates an overlap between the three of them, where although this set of passages seems to come out of left field, if they're talking to the Analects or the Art of War or the scholars of Sun Tzu, then it makes sense that as they set by their very firm argument that the means is really the important thing. There's nothing more important. He's saying without the proper motive, you won't have the means to do anything but to throw these people to the wolves. And so you need a proper motive to be benevolent as a leader, as a ruler. So I'm just throwing that out there for consideration. I want to hear what Kevin has to say, though.
Kevin,
My turn.
and I think Quan had his hand up.
Quan, yeah, Quan. Let's go, Quan.
No, Kevin, you're next.
Okay. I just basically break down this word. Originally, it's a two. Yeah, it means to speak. You use. I would imagine it's two people enjoy one goat. There's two. That's modern days. We change it to on the top is on yeah is the word. The bottom is like a sheep. So the challenge is how do you define the Chinese word, the good person? That's yeah. Then if when you read this passage compared to the next, the final one, comparable one, why you train 7 years put a war, defend your country, your value? Well, that's one way. It's on the last passage. See, if you don't train people, put them in a war, that's not good, right? That's criminal. It basically let the person, whoever seemed to die without training. Thank you.
Jason.
Yeah, thank you everyone. And then we reach our goal. We finish book 13, and then so I already unlocked the Zoom, so so we can we finish this one, and then I'm going to leave in a few minutes, and then next week we're going to deal with another book, book 14, 现 ask 现问. This one is much longer. They have a 44 chapter, and then I ran through it, and then probably we need 4 weeks. It's not 3 weeks to finish. Okay, so it's long, but luckily it's short. Each one is short, but difficult part is this book Confucius comments a lot of historical background. His contemporary statement, and also mentioned about what his the political wars during that time. So it's a little bit long, but it'll be very interesting. If you put the background when you read this one. Yeah. So anyway, thank you everyone, and then thank you Amon, thank you Joe, and thank you everyone. Have a great great contribution and the suggestion, and then I will see you next week. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, Jason, Mon, as always, being here and doing the translations. Quan. Now it's kind of open discussion if anybody wants to comment on anything in the Analects, but we're finishing book 13, what any takeaways specifically that you may have from that, or even this evening, obviously there's a couple good things we could actually have a further discussion on that we were just talking about. Go ahead.
No, so I want to come back to the fact that in Confucianism, the motivation is very important, because let's not forget that the major interpretation of the Chun Chu, which is the book on universal history, is the Gong Yang Zhuang. Okay, and in the Gong Yang Zhuang, the major concept was Tai Yi Tong, meaning that there is a match between the cosmological order and the human order that would be achieved by the epistemological development precisely. Because you can have an understanding of the reality of things, and you can be capable to see the opportunity and to seize it, okay, as Aman said, in the Taoist perspective, or you can be capable to have the weapons or the tools of powers that would be needed in a specific situation. But all those two stuff or those two categories are subordinated to your motivation, according to Confucianism. And the clearest and the most powerful expression of that theological perspective is precisely the Gong Yang Zhuang interpretation of the Chun Chu, upholding the major idea of universal history, going in the right direction for more justice. And the four cardinal virtues, one of them is the inner sense of justice, but to achieve justice in the social reality with wisdom, humanity, and valor, precisely.
Thank you, Juan. Mark, do you wish to comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Aman is still on. Maybe you are, but I think
I'm here.
You were just talking about the connection between means, opportunity, and motive, I believe, right? And
Yes.
So is Juan. So
the
is Juan. Yeah.
the means that yes, and definitely, Quan, I understand is commenting on this, but since you mentioned the means as being central to Sun Tzu, yeah, we had a discussion in our reading of Sun Tzu of the tactics versus the plan, or the strategy versus the means. And we also were saying that we wanted to have, this was right at the beginning of one was right in the middle of our discussion. It was around 628. We were talking about Gi or G strategy, whether it should be understood as plan, and the word mo possibly a strategy.
Okay.
But we were contrasting that with having a kind of 30,000 foot view, which I thought coincided with a kind of goal. So that if you have a means, it has to be that there's maybe a telos or an end or goal that you have in mind as well.
I would agree with that. I don't think that the Sun Tzu ignores motive or opportunity by any stretch. In fact, he definitely points to trying to create favorable opportunity and being clear as to what's motivating you into action. But the thesis of his argument hinges on, do you have the actual means to do this, even if you want to, even if you think you should? Are you capable? Which is why he starts off by enumerating sort of the cost benefit of war. And so much of the art of war centers around this idea of, are you really capable of this? I think it's centered on means, because means is probably the most rudimentary of that trifecta of means, motive, and opportunity. Any child is testing what they are capable of doing just by exploratory behavior. And to have the hubris to put myself into the mind of Sun Tzu at the time, I think he looked at the princelings around him as overgrown children. And so they needed an argument that spoke to them. And so although he could point to the importance of proper motive and being aware of real opportunities versus false opportunities, he centers his argument squarely around means. Means is the penultimate important consideration for this ruler or this general or this person to undertake. Confucius is making the argument much about motive. The motive is the penultimate importance. And I think I won't speak for most of China, but I think that it's a easier argument to make because it's demanding a constant reflectiveness on one's own motive. But Confucius is not shy about espousing to understand the motives of others. He is the consummate judge of character throughout the Analects. And so he understands the motives of people. He can identify the Junsa, the Shaoren, the people who are of empty vessels versus utilizable and valuable. And the Tao Te Ching centers its entire argument on a sensitivity to opportunity, a real appreciation. And to do that, you also have to scrutinize your own motivation. You also have to be aware of if you're overextending your efforts and your means to do something. But the Tao Te Ching is very squarely in the field of opportunity is penultimate. And it is so penultimate that there's nothing that you can do about it but to be aware of it, seize it when it occurs, or let it go by when it's a false flag. This is like I said, an article I've been working on. So I don't think it's to the exclusion of any of the other two, but I think each of them rests their argument as, here is what you will become most masterful if you become most skillful at being adept at seizing.
Excellent. Mark, do you have any reply to that?
So they all relate to an end goal or purpose, but in different modalities.
Mastery, depending on what that term means for each of them. Being masterful at fill in the blank.
Yeah, are you talking about telos kind of purpose, Mark?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Go ahead, Quan.
And here I cannot prevent myself to add a comment on the fact that there is a nobility of hierarchy between the three. Because once again, you cannot rule based only on the fact that you're skillful to read the situation, the configuration of the situation. Okay, that is certainly a very interesting skill to have, that you are capable to see the lines of force of how reality is moving. Also, the fact that you're capable to organize your state, and that you are capable to have the tools of power in order to preserve or to maintain your state and even to expand it. But if you don't have a motivation for something that is much higher, which is to match the cosmological order with the human order, you don't have a civilizational project that would bring you through the millennia. And I think here that the higher motivational goal of the Rujia, of the school of the scholars, is a stronger basis for a state or a civilization to endure through the millennia. It doesn't mean that you don't have to learn to be skillful to read the practicality of the situation at a given moment, or that you would not be skillful in preparing the tools of power. And when I say the tools of power, I'm not speaking only of weapons. I'm speaking of mental preparedness. I'm speaking of education. I'm speaking of the deeper layers of the tools of power, and not only economy and politics and the military, as most people would understand when they hear the expression tools of power. So inevitably, if you want to create a civilizational project, you need to go to the highest possible goal.
Thank you for that, Quan. Would anybody like to share overall what they have taken from chapter 16? Anything specific? David and I actually had an interesting, 13. Forgive me. So I was like, way ahead of time. But David and I actually had I thought to be an interesting conversation yesterday or last week about there was a role ethics element of it, and at the time I didn't really realize the how the five relationships actually fit into the text itself. And I compared and contrasted that as to why people take action in the first place. And the idea was I compared it with actually Stoicism, where there's a passage from Epictetus where he talks about being obedient to your father, even though it's it's not necessarily not the best individual. At the same time, Confucius was also saying about how to be honorable, even though your father's actually maybe committing a crime, that you need to honor your father. I thought that was interesting to me, but what had escaped me at the time was the fundamental relationships between five relationships between ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, elder and brother, and younger brother and friend and friend. And there's a lot of role ethics in the middle of this. That's what I can go back and read some of the passages, but that actually helped me with a couple of other things that I'm working on in particular, with a role ethics presentation that's kind of related to cosmopolitanism. I also found this interesting as well tonight, when we were actually having the discussion as to self-awareness and shame. I think that's a very important thing to understand. A lot of people, as we said, I forget who said it earlier, that people look at shame only in the negative sense, And while it serves as a function to fundamentally, I feel change, make it allow you to change your behavior. And I make it the distinction between that and guilt. Guilt is about the act. So guilt may be something that requires justice, but shame is something deeper, whereas it's something that is inside you that's bothering you, that allows you to say, I'm no longer going to do that again. And the example I always think about is, just say somebody, you're sitting down and there's somebody that's elderly standing up. Somebody comes on the bus and they say, well, or somebody that is already on the bus would actually give up their seat, and you'd feel a little bit of a little ashamed. And maybe the idea that you walk away from that and say, I'm not going to allow that to happen again. I'm not going to behave in that way. Anyway, there's an element of self-awareness with it. And I think that was an interesting part of this evening's discussion. And then how we related that to humility and the idea of social behavior. And that was with number, I believe, 22. I believe. Or 20, no, maybe it was 21.
I think it might 13, 20, or 21, yeah.
It's 21, yeah. So I don't know if anybody has any kind of comment on that or anything, or again, anything that you wish to talk about.
I guess
we also covered a lot about public service and leadership and what it means to be virtuous in a leadership position. That's been a theme throughout the book, but I think that we definitely saw it in this chapter. So anyway, go ahead, Mark. I cut you off. I apologize.
No, that's
You also went back to number 18. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I just was going to echo what you were saying, Joseph, that the concepts that seem to really stand out from book 13, filial piety, Xiao, I guess it is, and Ren, we talked a lot about. There was a word for good, which I forget what the word was, but Aman had said it was a combination of the characters of mother and child. And there was also the difficulty with ruling and the need to be able to tell the ruler they may not be doing the right thing, stand up to power. I guess it was a kind of guidebook, like we were saying at the beginning of the book when we started it, as to how to rule and how to be a jinsu.
Right. Were you about to say something, David?
No.
Okay.
There was also the speech. Sorry, Joe. There was also the part about names and the rectification of names having to correspond with the facts. And I think that we made a lot of that. I was around 13.5, 13.6.
I'm looking back at some of my notes here.
I don't know if the word for good, how, H-A-O. I guess I got it.
I had mentioned, go ahead. Quan, actually, can you? comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. It's no, Mark is right. It's how in this it's written
Okay.
with a woman and a child,
Okay.
and a son to be precise.
One thing that I actually mentioned last week is I thought number 16 was kind of profound, but nobody even talked about it. I think it was 16. Hang on. Maybe it was
There was also the idea, I think, in 13 that there was no single bullet, there was no silver bullet, no single saying
yeah,
that
I very, very much like that. Yes, that there are no easy solutions, that there isn't a simplistic answer. I agree with you. I thought that was I appreciated that one as well. And as I go back through, there was one last week that we covered essentially that talked about the desire for people to come to your country, and as a sign of that you're doing a good job. And I'm trying to think which one it was. I thought it was 16.
well, the 16 does say, and those who are far away are attracted.
Right. That's right. Okay. It is. So I thought that was actually a pretty profound passage, in the sense that, yes, if the state is operating or functioning the way it should, that people ought to, want to be attracted to that state.
But now we're in a situation where those many who live here in the US seem displeased with it, but yet those who are far away are attracted and they're running here. So there's
so that was the example that I brought up. So it's an interesting. I thought it was timely to a certain degree.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the problem of defining what's a good state, where you don't want to get into the analysis of all the layers of what constitutes a good state, a proper government that respects its people, where the values that are brought forth, in generations are worthy values. You don't want to go through all that work. You can say, well, the thing that attracts people, and there will be something that attracts the productivity of a nation, the wealth of a nation, the natural resources of a nation. And this is how Rousseau, this is in the early Enlightenment, they were defining, well, what's a good form of government? Well, just let's say the governments are best are the ones that have the biggest population. It's a very, well, they're not killing everyone off with famines constantly. Okay, it's a very first order but superficial, measurement. I mean, it has some degree of subtlety in that people will over time hear about things that are bad and not choose to migrate into North Korea, so yeah, their population won't grow continually, but it's not a principled one, is it?
No, that's a good point. It really isn't.
Maybe in context it has more than it's implying.
Quan, actually, I was going to ask you something else as well, but go ahead and comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you go first if you were going to comment.
Okay. No, I think that our discussion is very interesting, because in a state you always have to make a kind of very refined balance between the motivation, which is the epistemological growth, the tools of power, because the tools of power have their importance, and the capacity to see the opportunities given the configuration of the situation at a specific moment. Because if I take the example of China at the 19th century, for example, the old scholars were perfectly right to stress the intention, the motivation, and the aristocratic attitude. But at the same time, the level of technological development in the 19th century in China was completely disastrous. So it's very good to have good motivation and an aristocratic attitude, but if you don't have a minimum of tools of power and having the capacity to seize the right opportunities in a given configuration, it would not be very practical too. I would say that I still believe that there is a hierarchy, that the motivation, the aristocratic attitudes is important, but you cannot neglect completely the tools of power and the capacity to see the right configuration before doing something. And there is a kind of interaction between the three anyway, because you can at a certain moment a state can have right tools of power and so on, but those tools of power need to be maintained and need to be expanded. So if you don't have the right attitude and the right education to maintain them and to expand them, you might also have a kind of decadence coming from your lack of right attitude. So those three elements are not separated. They are in organic interactions.
Yeah, I mean, so when you're saying expand the tools of power, would that come with an expansion of the state itself?
Well, it depends on what you mean by expansion of the state, but I suppose yes. And it depends also what do you want to do with those tools of power, okay? Because once again, we go back to I'm a fan of the Gongyang traditional Gongyang interpretation of the universal history of the Chunchu, okay? Because if you don't have the highest motivation in terms of civilizational drive, and the civilizational drive of the Gongyang interpretation is 大一统, okay? A perfect match between the cosmological order of justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom with the human order embodying those cardinal virtues. Or to be exact, the cosmological levels would be the timeless forms of beauty, goodness, and truth. And those timeless forms of beauty, goodness, and truth within the cosmological order is translated at the human order, at the four cardinal virtues coming from the metaphysical four seeds that, when they are nurtured and developed, are called, in the sense of justice, humanity, valor, and wisdom. So if you don't, once again, I think it's the fourth time I repeat that, but I think it's important. We have to be down. We have to be down to earth, of course, to take into account the reality of the tools of power and of the capacity to see the opportunities in a certain space-time configuration. I'm not looking down on those two factors. But if a civilization is not driven by the highest motivation, which is precisely, in the words of the Gongyang interpretation, the matching of the cosmological order and of the human order, you would use your tools of power for destruction and not for a higher civilizational level, first for your own nations and for the nations around you and for all the world.
One thing I was going to actually ask you about too is like, and I'm sorry I keep coming back to this, because it's of an area of interest to me. And I would have had this discussion last week with you, but the idea of role ethics in Confucianism versus role ethics, say, and with the Greeks. And, I found that to be an interesting question as to, because it gets to the point, the idea of they're both virtue ethics, right? And you're both pursuing virtue, but it seems to be done for different reasons. And I was wondering if we can go into the details, and actually I was wondering your opinion specifically on which one do you think is preferable, which system, because the action is being taken for very different reasons, right?
Exactly. I would say that once again, you know that I always repeat that answer, but I don't have a better answer for now. The epistemological growth, as understood within the Confucianist tradition, are from the Ta Sui, the Great Learning, the Zhongyong, the Doctrine of the Mean, the Analects, and the Mencius. And you have to achieve your epistemological development for yourself, of course. But within what I would call the mythology of Confucianism, that epistemological achievement is not only for yourself, okay? Because you have four domains for your achievement to be expressed. The first domain is yourself, obviously. The second domain is your family. The third domain is your state, and the fourth domain is the whole world. And I want again to match the two. The epistemological development per se and universal history, okay, because the two are deeply linked. Okay, let's not forget that within the Confucianist school, you have the four domain for expressing your epistemological achievement or your epistemological adventure, but having always in mind that high goal, which is called 大一统, union of cosmological order and human order.
Right.
And anyone having been brainwashed within the Confucianist matrix is aware that everything that he's doing is for that 大一统, okay? Utopia, if you want, okay? But I prefer to say it in Chinese because the right translation for 大一统 is really union of cosmological order and human order.
So when I compare and contrast that with the Greeks, I look at it as, okay, you're acting on it because it's your personal integrity that you're maintaining. But
yes,
it's still to maintain order.
I would say that your personal integrity is a prerequisite before you can do something valuable. Okay, because but once again, integrity comes from intangere, okay, meaning that your soul is complete. So if you did not achieve your epistemological growth having a complete soul, you would not be capable to truly serve your family, your state, and the world, because everything you do would be for selfish reason, even if you're not really aware of it.
It would be for, yeah, right, exactly. But it would be for selfish reason, but there would be still some conformity. Like, so I would be selfish in maintaining the rituals that, the state requires. And it would be doing it because it's my own self-interest, and I may not be, I may be doing it because it's the optimum thing for me to do material wise versus the optimum thing to do for myself spiritually.
I would say that as a,
Is
that's a very deep question, and I would say that only each one can answer to himself in the
Right.
secret of
I
his
agree with
own
that.
heart.
Agreed. I one of my favorite statements is that, you know, I have no window to look into another man's heart. However, I do think that we were just talking about motivations.
Absolutely.
And
the problem with
and
motivation that you need to trust that the other is a gentleman. Of course, you have time. Okay, you have time. If someone is behaving perfectly for 40 years, we would think that that person is sincere, but he might behave incorrectly the 42nd year. Okay, so you never know. Even if someone behave perfectly during all his life, you don't have access to his mind. And here
right.
we have the problem of the oligarchy. Okay, you can have an oligarchy which is good enough to maintain order and harmony and, let's say, a certain advanced society. But that efficient oligarchy, is it good? That's the big question.
Right. That's a pretty big question. I'd say most times they're not. That's my opinion.
Let's say that history, the written history that we have since the last 4,000 years, tend to tend to make us believe that we don't even have an efficient oligarchy, because they would become decadent and they would become incapable
Right.
after 2 or 3 centuries at the most.
It's very interesting. It's a question that I've been diving into by looking at just you know, it also speaks to something else very deep too. Where do loyalties lie? You know, and in today's world, you know, now that we're more global, where do loyalties lie? And as a human being, or do they lie as more as an individual that's within a state?
Yes, because your question, if I may change a little bit your question, do we truly have a human civilization in 2023?
Do we know?
Not
I
according to
don't
the
think
way
so.
you defined Ren or Ren earlier, as kind of human flourishing or human mastery, I think you called it, of understanding the different needs and desires of everyone in the room, being able to unify them and direct them all towards the common good. I think you said something like that, Quan.
Yes,
Do we have that?
I don't know.
Well,
I asked the question.
well, if you have someone behaving well for 40 years, and in the 41st year, they do some indecent, disrespectful things, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were corrupt, you know, for the first 40 years. So I think what we're saying is that life goes through changes. So we may have had a more decent government in the United States, for example, than we do at the moment, or we may be going through fits and changes. So I think these fluctuations are real. And I don't think there's necessarily such a thing as a stability that's assured. It's a constant struggle. Like my health, I think I have to go to the gym if I want to be healthy. You know, something like that. It requires, it's a battle.
That's very interesting, because for someone who is more for a top-down type of government, I want to quote Benjamin
Right.
Franklin, okay? Because Benjamin Franklin said that the best form of government is the republic, but if you're capable to keep it, meaning that you need to create a virtuous man precisely.
Yeah. If you'll have it. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, because
Yeah,
the
actually, no,
no, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
no, I was actually just writing about something similar today about the civic virtue and how civic virtue in the founding fathers actually, how that was a role in order for the, I mean, they saw virtue as a way of actually maintaining a republic. And no, that was, and it is essential. It is essential. But the question it always becomes then, how do you cultivate that? Because that's where this is like Confucianism, it seems to be, oh, David, you're leaving? All right, anyway. It was good to see you. Thank you for stopping by, as always.
Thanks.
All right, man. Good seeing you.
Sure.
But the reason why I say this is because it's interesting if you can maintain it. But then, okay, you're talking about civic virtue. How is civic virtue best maintained? Like, how is it, in what structure?
But I think,
I mean, is it a republic? I think it is. I'm advocating that, but I mean, the Chinese government would obviously disagree.
I would say that we have different mythology, but at the deepest, I think that we agree, okay? Because when Benjamin Franklin said that the highest form of government is the republic, but you need to be capable to keep it, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but he gave the Confucianist answer. It means that you need to create a virtuous man having a run, being capable to be the leaders, to inspire people to keep the republic.
Go ahead, Mark, what you were about to say?
I think I was about to say that, was it your original question whether we have any, was it humanity you were asking about?
Human civilization in 20.
Human civilization, yeah. Because according to what you were saying, Quan, because there are these four levels or four modes of the self, the family, the state, and the world, we can't have one without having them all, I think. Or at least we need to start with the self and hope that we can develop a family that has those same qualities, etc.
Yeah, well, that's the Confucianist plan, if I may say so. You start with yourself, you try to expand it to your family, and if you still have time and energy, and if you're capable and you have the opportunities, you expand it to serve the state, and if you're capable, well, you expand it to the whole world.
And meetup exists somewhere in between the family and the world.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, it depends. It depends. I mean, it could be the family.
It could be your...
I mean, there is that possibility. Anything about, one of the things that maybe not this chapter in particular, but something that is obviously very important with Confucianism is this idea of, how self-cultivation through education and self-reflection, and the idea that you constantly should be learning through self-improvement. But as far as like one thing I don't really get is that where there's an element of self-reflection
found in these chapters, because I feel like most of the reflection is being done by Confucius telling his students what their problems are. And that's not self-reflection. And they actually seem to do the opposite a couple of different times. So, and essentially, I see very clearly the idea of lifelong learning as the pursuit of virtue. He makes that clear. But I don't see any of the reflection of self. And the only reason I bring that up is because it kind of relates to the whole idea of what I was just talking about with role ethics and how the individual actually interacts with society in general. So, is there a reason for that? Or am I missing it in different parts of it? Because I actually haven't gone through the rest of the books, to be quite honest. And where is it? If I did miss it.
Can you repeat your question, please, Joe?
So the idea of self-reflection, how he talks about, essentially self, cultivating them, the self. But I don't see anything about self-reflection throughout the Analects. I feel like it's only a set of lessons that then you're supposed to implement into your life. You see what I'm saying? There's no idea of authenticity, I'd say.
I think that the choice of word is perfect, authenticity. And
that's what I'm trying to say.
And I would say that here is precise, according to my understanding, is the 4 millennia long battle between the Rujia and one of its branch, the Taoists. Because in the Confucianist school, the original one, you wouldn't be given role models, you wouldn't be given values that are considered as what you have to achieve. I am not sure that authenticity is something that can be called a value at the time of Confucius, okay? Because if we understand authenticity, I want to be sure that we understand the same thing with the word authenticity. Authenticity, that is, it is my way, but I would go my life with my way, if I understand it, okay? And I define what is the supreme values or the supreme role models for me outside of the dominant
constructs of society.
Yeah. I'm not sure that within the aristocracy, the mainstream aristocracy of Confucius' time, that authenticity would be something very valuable. And there's precisely a stream of those aristocrats, which is a minority stream, promoting what we call authenticity nowadays, and that stream is called the Taoists. And if you remember the anecdote of the bandit Chu, that the elder brother of the bandit Chu told Confucius, you better not go to see my younger brother because he's a true tiger, he would not listen to you. And Confucius went to see him all the same and tried to impose upon him the role models or the virtues of the mainstream Confucianism, and he got insulted incredibly, and he got called hypocrites and so on. I would call that, yes, there is a stream of authenticity among the Rujia, meaning the scholars of that time, but it's not the mainstream scholars of the time. And it's still not the case, okay? Because Confucianism is very related to the service of the family and of the state, even nowadays.
Well, right. I mean, and that's my point, is even so, if you think about it in the sense that, and actually the discussion I had recently on with some people on honor, then if in this particular instance, honor would be externally imposed, the idea of honor, as opposed to being something you discover from within and which becomes your own principles that you live by. You could not, like the way it's set up, the way I'm seeing it set up in current modern day China.
Yes, that's interesting what you say, but I would say that that idea of authenticity or personal honor, I don't think it was a so strong idea in the West and the East, okay? Because if you take the Greek cities, for example, honor is not what is authentic to you. Honor is precisely serving the gods and the city and your family. That was the life of that was the life of an aristocrat in the West or in the East.
It follows the morality of the time. I completely agree with that. Like if you track what it means to be honorable, it's dependent upon, like the Greeks would have said, for the state. Then you would have had a period, where it would have been for the gods, right?
Yeah.
But then, in a more individualistic sense, the idea of honor, what it means today, even, I think is slightly different than it was. Obviously, it's a lot different. And what I'm saying by that is that somebody that is being true to themselves is what could be seen as honorable.
Yes, and you chose a perfect word for that, authenticity.
Right, exactly. And I think the two are linked. Like yeah.
I don't know to what extent we are being too modern here.
And that's why I was saying that's what I was about to, where we are.
Yeah. Mark want to say something.
I was wondering if authenticity is visible in the one who spoke up to the ruler when they saw they were doing something that was not good. To be able
That's a good point.
Speak power.
Yes.
The dissidents today, the dissident who was caught, where was that, in Taiwan? And all those dissidents who are so bravely speaking truth to power are being authentic, I think.
Yes, but at the same time, they are embodying a cardinal virtue for any Confucian gentleman, meaning speaking truth to powers, precisely. So it's part of the mainstream values.
Well, I just wanted to share that, and thank you, Joseph and Quan and everyone in the group for hosting. I'm going to head out as well.
Take care, Mark. No, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's something that we. Thanks for stopping by. Thank you for reading.
Okay, mes amis.
What's
Yes.
that?
Ciao. He said les amis, the French.
Correct. But really quickly, Mark, what version did you read this evening?
It was the C Lao LAU. I did put it in the chat at one point.
Okay.
Is it still there? It was
I didn't see it actually.
Hold on a second. I see it. It was at 8:39. My Central Time, anyway. It was right after I wrote about woo and hate. You see it? I can put it in again. Here, let's see if it goes in now. This is it.
Thank you.
Cool.
I know I
Yep.
looked up who Lao was, but I don't remember at the moment. So
Oh, this is free too.
all right.
Okay,
So hopefully
great.
next week here, gang.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Bye, Kay.
Good night.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna probably just close it down. But Juan, thank you as always.
My pleasure.
Our discussion, and yet we were getting a little bit modern, but I do want to explore that a little bit more. But anyway, I usually do announcements, but I don't think that that's necessarily. I think Saturday Jason's having something on the Dow, which is actually.
I thought that on Saturday, which is September 30th, that I would have something on Wu Zetian, no?
That would actually make sense. Hang on. Let me
Yeah.
see.
Anyway, I'm ready for this Saturday. If it's postponed, I will be ready for the next Saturday. It's not a big deal.
Are you leading that?
If it's the stuff on Impress Wu Zetian, yes, it would be me. But I did not receive a message from Jason that it has been postponed. Anyway, if it's for this coming Saturday, I will be ready. If not, I can give it the next one. It's not a big deal.
Well, I definitely will be attending if I think it is a Saturday. For some reason, I thought I saw the 30th.
Okay.
I just don't see it right now. So I'll definitely see you Saturday.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Thanks for everything, Juan. And I might message you through Meetup, actually, with a couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
But
okay, so see you next Tuesday. Ciao.
Next Tuesday. Take care.
You too.
Joe, are we still here? Oh, he left too. Oh, I didn't know he was leaving. I thought we